Okay, so let's talk about the combat mechanics. Like, how do you actually run combat in the Magitech Chronicles? Well, thankfully, it's easy. I've set it up to be a very simple to understand system. I like to play narrative heavy structured games. So, like, I'm all about the story, and combat is cool and it should happen often, but it should be a fun encounter. And while combat in the Magitech Chronicles is lethal, it also allows you to do some over the top things. And if you're good at stuff, you really feel like you're good at that. You know, if you are a martial artist, you're going to really kick people's ass in combat. Anyway, let's jump into the combat system itself. The basic overview is right here. This is all you really need to understand about the way combat flows. You're going to roll initiative. That initiative lasts the entire fight. You select the acting character, the person with the highest initiative, and they've got 2 actions to spend. They can move, they can attack, they can spend both actions at once to sprint. They have to use their actions in some Game Master approved way. Then you're going to proceed to the next highest character on the list and repeat step 2 until you reach the end of the round. Begin the next round. So all that's left is to understand the individual pieces. For determining initiative, you're taking the base initiative, which you made in character creation, and just rolling a d6 at the beginning of combat. Innate defenses, brace, dodge, and skepticism are what you need to understand. Brace is used for physical defenses, dodge is for ranged, and skepticism is for magic. It's sort of a rock, paper, scissors system where your character probably is really good at one of these things. Maybe decent at a second and then bad at something. So almost everybody that you run into, both the party and the people that you're fighting, probably have a weakness. And that's why the system exists as it does, because you don't run into things that I've seen in games like Dungeons & Dragons where, somebody's got 60 AC and, 1,000 hit points. What are you going to do? There's always some way to affect somebody, or usually some way to affect somebody when you have multiple defenses as we use here. Your active defenses are what happens if you actually get hit. We're talking about armor primarily and resistances. Armor will reduce physical damage. So let's say I get hit for 10 damage and I have 5 armor, I'm taking 5. Resistance is exactly the same thing, but for magic. Masteries are something that all characters want to get more of, and you can purchase them with experience. Normally when you roll, let's say you're rolling to hit somebody and you have 7 dice, you're going to count the 5s and 6s, and those are successes. You're totaling up successes. More successes is good. If you have a mastery, you succeed on a 4, 5, or a 6. So instead of a third of the time, it's half the time, which means you're going to succeed a lot more often and you're really, really good at your masteries. So you want to assign your masteries to the area that you're going to use most frequently. That's almost always recommended to be some sort of combat skill. We're talking ranged, melee, spellcasting, something that's going to allow you to be effective in combat. Because if you're not really good at that, it can be a problem. And I'm not saying don't play a non-combat character, but, GMs, make sure that your players are aware that if they don't have some sort of combat skill with a mastery, they may regret it later. Accuracy is very straightforward. It just adds more dice to a roll. If you have a weapon and it has +2 accuracy, you're getting 2 more dice. Armor penetration reduces armor point for point. So if I have 3 armor penetration and you had 5 armor, now you have 2. Movement and sprinting is very straightforward. You can use any map that you want. So if you are playing on Roll20 and you're using squares or hexes or whatever your setup is, you can move your character agility times 2 in whatever that movement is. So it's meters, it's yards, it's squares, it's hexes, whatever your gaming table is using, this system scales with that. Characters may also choose to sprint, which is a little bit faster and also raises their dodge by 1, but lowers their brace to 0. So if somebody tries to hit them with a melee attack and connects, they're gonna get nailed. So that's the downside of sprinting full out. Now we're on to the roll to hit, which is very straightforward. You are going to roll the total number of dice that your character has. So let's say Aaron is rolling to shoot someone with a spell rifle. He's going to add his 5 agility and a 4 range. And if his rifle has extra dice, which, a lot of them will, he'd add that too. In this case, he doesn't. So he's rolling 9 dice. And let's say he gets 3 successes. That's going to apply to his opponent's defenses. So if the opponent has a 3 or less brace, that would hit. And the more successes that you have, as you see when we get down into determining damage here, the more damage you do. So there's 1 roll for to hit and damage. If I get 7 successes and I only needed 3, you're taking the 4 extra as additional damage. It's just making everything I do more effective. As far as applying defenses like armor and resistances, a caveat about resistances, magic resistance is fairly specific. So there is blanket magic resistance, but often you'll hear something like void resistance or fire resistance. That only applies to that type of magic. Anything that gets past that resistance or armor is going to go straight to the hit points. And when somebody's hit points hit 0, they're in trouble. If I take a hit and it takes me down to -7, I don't die, but I'm in a down state. And if I take another hit past that, I die. And when I say another hit greater than your fortitude. So like if I take some bleeding damage or, take a point from this or a point from that, and I've got a 3 or a 4 fortitude, I'm not going to die. But if somebody is deliberately trying to kill me and they hit me hard enough that it's greater than my fortitude, and I'm in that down state, dead. It's over. So you can only take that 1 extra hit. So be careful and recruit life mages. Healing and recovery, as you can see, is pretty brutal without a life mage. If you don't have a life mage to directly heal you, then it can take like a week to heal to full. It really can. So definitely be cognizant of that, GMs, and make sure that your players have some means of healing. Flanking and edge. Edge is one of the most important concepts you want to know. You can only get edge from one source. It does not stack, so you can't have a bunch of edges. But if you have an edge, you get 2 successes automatically. So before you've even rolled, you're just getting that bonus 2 successes. And one way to get it that most players are going to use is flanking. If you flank someone, if you have 2 of your miniature models adjacent to it really in any way, then you're considering flanking it, even if you don't have somebody directly behind it, and you're going to get that edge in combat. They're having to fight 2 opponents, you're getting that bonus. But you can get it in other ways. Like if you are a larcenist and you were standing behind someone and they're unaware of you, you're going to get edge. So you can't stack those bonuses, as I said, but you do want to get it in some way. And characters are always trying to make sure they have it for every roll. Splitting actions is not something I see a lot of people do. It can be done thematically, or if you have a specific, something in mind that you want to do, the rule is there at least. Common penalties that you'll run into. Cover is the most common. It's going to give you +2 range difficulty, so you're raising that difficulty threshold by 2. So somebody has a 3 dodge. Now they've effectively got a 5 if they're dodging behind cover. If you are blinded, all of your attacks are made at a +4 difficulty threshold. If you're prone, +2. Sickened, +1 per severity. So the sicker you are, the worse it gets. Beyond normal range, so if it's out of where you can see, then it's +2 difficulty per range increment. So if it's on the horizon and you're trying to pick it off with a rifle or something, you're going to get +2 per range increment of that rifle. Lastly, and this is the very last section, so this will hopefully be a fairly short video. If you are worried that your party is going to get crushed, we have a way to deal with that. You can scale encounters to fit your party by applying either a lesser or a greater template. So oftentimes what I've run into is some groups are new, like maybe they've never role played before, they're fairly new at this, and they are getting, hammered by whatever you throw at them. If you worry that's going to happen, or if that's been happening, start applying a lesser template to the things that you're throwing at them. So if it's a worm, make it a lesser worm. You're going to cut the hit points by 50%, so it's going to go down faster. You're going to lower all defenses by 1. This is the single biggest change, so weaken it significantly because now it's much easier for everybody to affect. You're going to lower armor and resistances by 2, so they're going to hit harder when they do. And you're going to lower the worm's dice pools by 3, so when it hits, it's not hitting as hard, it's more likely to miss, it doesn't do as much damage. And that's why this template is so useful. You can apply this across the board to any content you see for the Magitech Chronicles. So if you see something you want to use in your group and it's a little too powerful, this is how you weaken it. And conversely, if it's something that is a little bit too weak, or let's say you've got that hyper-optimized group of like 7 hardcore role players that, know combat inside and out, are a tactical squad and will just take things down, you might need to use a greater template. You might need to make it stronger, and you're going to do exactly the same thing in reverse. You're increasing its hit points, its defenses, its armor, and its dice pools. So it's a much more challenging way to play. This is just an easy shorthand for you to use as a game master on the fly, so that if you are presented with an encounter, let's say you're looking at the First Contact saga, and you want to use the combat and you're worried it's going to be too hard, you can make it easier, you can make it harder. It's a lever you get to pull. Anyway, if you have questions about the combat system, please ask those in the comments. You guys are going to be forming the basis of the errata. Just let us know what you need to know and where you run into problems. I will have some live game sessions in the near future. And when those go live, hopefully that'll clear up any lingering questions about the system. Anyway, guys, I do need to get back to the writing, so I will have another video for you next week.